Hey everyone, and welcome to What Did I Miss?, where today I'll be breaking down the 8th episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, titled The Elysian Kingdom, and also looking for any Easter eggs and references that you may have missed. This week, we find the crew of the Enterprise in a story within a story, in which most of the cast are reimagined as characters from a children's tale about a ruler who is forced to make an impossible decision. With 2 episodes left in the first season of Strange New Worlds, I think that you can already call this the best first season of any Star Trek series, and episodes like this one are a big reason why. The Elysian Kingdom not only created an opportunity for the cast to show their range by playing other types of roles, most of which being delightfully eccentric, but also tricked the audience into thinking that we were just watching a silly bottle episode and then snuck in a heartbreaking piece of character development for one of its main cast. So far, the mission statement of this show seems to be that Star Trek Strange New Worlds wants to put the fun back in profundity, and it is why I think this new series has been so successful to this point. But before I start gushing about the episode, I just want to thank you for clicking on this video, and ask that if you do enjoy it to please hit that like button. Also, I'm still seeing about 89% of my views from non-subscribers, so if you are coming back each week, please hit that subscribe button too. In the coming weeks, I'll be setting up videos with some of my favorite creators from other channels and media, so if you have a channel that you watch that you would like to see me collaborate with, let me know in the comments as well. The title of the episode is a reference to the story that Dr. Mbenga has been shown to be reading to his daughter Rukia in the 3rd and 6th episodes this season. We learn this season that Rukia had a rare disease known as cygnocemia, to which there was no known cure. Dr. Mbenga has been keeping his daughter in a transporter buffer, effectively extending her life until he could find a cure for her. Star Trek has often created episodes centered around fictional characters taking over or otherwise affecting the crews of their vessels, with the Sherlock Holmes-inspired Next Generation episode Ship in a Bottle and the Voyager episode Bride of Chaotica being 2 of my personal favorites. This episode of Strange New Worlds also shares a few similarities with the Bride of Chaotica episode, as in that episode members of the crew are forced to play roles in a story, and a new life form uses the story to make first contact with the crew. In a blink and you'll miss it moment, when Dr. Mbenga picks up the book, you can see that the author is Benny Russell. This is a big Easter egg to fans of the series Deep Space Nine, since Benny Russell appeared in another Star Trek episode in which the cast got to play other characters, the critically acclaimed masterpiece Far Beyond the Stars. In that episode, Benjamin Sisko is somehow sent to 20th century Earth into the body of an author named Benny Russell, who is unable to get his story published due to the intense racism that he faces. While the episode was also effectively a bottle episode, although the character was revisited once again in the show's 7th season, it posed some much larger questions about how Sisko was linked to Benny Russell. It was even inferred that Sisko and essentially all of Star Trek were created from the writings of Russell, and that Sisko became aware of this because of his association with the Prophets. But now that we see the name Benny Russell on another story, we know that he was a real person in this universe and that he did eventually get published. If you notice, most of the characters in the story are drawn as having dark skin, something that Benny Russell was adamant about including in his stories, which is why he could not get them published at the time. Women also face prejudice in the same time period depicted in the episode Far Beyond the Stars, and in fact, the person who created the character of Dr. Mbenga, Darlene Hartman, went by the pseudonym Simon Lang for many years, so that when her work was submitted, the studios would believe that it was submitted by a man. Also, the front cover of the book uses the colors blue, red, green, and gold to accentuate the title and author, and these are the colors used on Starfleet uniforms. If you don't think that green is an official Starfleet uniform color, check out my video from earlier this season. Rukia complains that she likes the story but not the ending, and wishes to change it to something new and interesting. One of the underlying themes of this and many other episodes this season is that a story can have a different ending than you expect, and even though the doctor was not able to cure his daughter through medicine in this episode, his actions did allow her to have a fuller life. I think that this point is being made so often because while the audience may believe that they know what happens to many of these characters, like Captain Pike and Spock in the future, that Strange New Worlds can still change your perspective of these characters while not necessarily rewriting them. I know that before the show aired, there was a large concern that because of their place in history in relation to the original series, just years before Captain Kirk takes command of the Enterprise, that the stories told here would be inconsequential or otherwise retconned, something I spoke at length about in my video last week. So I think that the show is trying to tell us that while we may think we know everything about what is going to happen to these characters, that this show is here to prove that we don't, and will create stories that enhance our enjoyment of the characters we already love. After the Doctor is forced to return his daughter to the transporter buffer, he goes back to work on a cure for her that literally blows up in his face. Watching this episode a second time, I really appreciate how this whole sequence is basically another bit of literal foreshadowing, as the mixture that the Doctor is making is red, signifying how the sequence is a red herring and has nothing to do with what occurs to the crew in this episode. On the bridge, Captain Pike and Spock talk about how their recent survey provided a nice change of pace from the action that they have been used to seeing. Spock reminds him of the human superstition of calling attention to good things by saying them out loud, which would then lead to things going awry. This is another common trope used at the beginning of Star Trek episodes, with my favorite use being this scene from the DS9 episode Our Man Bashir, another great episode in which the cast play different roles.
Don't worry, Doctor. We're going to have a wonderful time. After all, what could possibly go wrong?
After the ship is unable to move and Lieutenant Ortegas is injured, Dr. Mbenga is called to the bridge, only to find that it looks like he's been given a makeover as a Renaissance fair. If you notice, the crest of the kingdom as well as the pennants worn by the characters all look like stars, possibly confirming the story's connection to the other story that we know was written by Benny Russell, Far Beyond the Stars. Then we get to meet the cast as new characters, of which I have to say that Anson Mount's portrayal of the Grima Wormtongue-like character Amin Roth was probably my favorite. I also really like Christina Chong as the entitled yet tone-deaf Princess Talia, as well as Celia Rose Gooding as the evil Queen Neve. Even though the story is written by Benny Russell, I think that some of these characters are based on ones from Greek and Irish mythology, as Elysia is a legendary realm from that folklore. For instance, Talia is known as one of the 9 muses and the patron of comedy, which definitely describes Christina Chong's portrayal in this episode. Miss Chong recently revealed in an interview to the website Fansided that she began her career wanting to work in musical theater, however, was always told that she was a better actress. So I'm sure that playing this role was a lot of fun for her. Also, Queen Neve may be based on Queen Maeve. No, not the character from The Boys, but rather the mythological deity that she is based on, the Irish goddess of intoxication. Castor and Pollux, the 2 characters that Hemmer and Spock become, are also from Greek mythology and are regarded as the patron saint of sailors. I think that this connection is also referenced early in the episode when it is Spock and Hemmer who work to find a solution after the ship is unable to move, effectively trying to steer the ship away from danger. The Evil Queen soldiers are even called the Crimson Guard, possibly a reference to the red shirt meme that is associated with Starfleet security officers. It should also be pointed out that the dog that Princess Talia is carrying is Christina Chong's dog in real life, who is also named Runa, and who Miss Chong takes with her everywhere, much like her character. I also enjoyed seeing Spock play an evil wizard, and that the production was able to procure the wig that Marcus wore on Babylon 5 for the role. The fairy tale told in this episode also has some similarities with the ones told in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and the actor who first played Spock, Leonard Nimoy, was also a big fan of these stories, even releasing a song in the late 1960s titled The Ballad of Bilbo Baggins. After being betrayed and captured, Dr. Mbenga is finally able to speak with Hemmer, who seems to be the only other crew member unchanged by what has taken over the crew. Hemmer tells the Doctor that he felt a psychic consciousness try to invade his mind, but was able to block it out due to his years of mental training. Hemmer is a subspecies of Andorian known as Anar, and although Andorians have been around since the original series, the Anar were first introduced in an Enterprise episode of the same name. Besides being a paler skin color than their Andorian brethren, some Anar also have lost their sight and have telepathic abilities. The actor who plays Hemmer, Bruce Horak, is also a blind person, and is really remarkable for me to watch him play the role so effortlessly that I forget that he's actually blind. They escape their cell but are then confronted by the Crimson Guard, which allows for Lieutenant Ortegas, or in this case Sir Adia, to display their sword fighting skills. It is very appropriate for the helmsman of the Enterprise to be good with a sword, as this was something that Hikaru Sulu was also shown to be proficient with, in both the original series episode The Naked Time, as well as the 2009 Star Trek movie. After they make it to the engine room, the last cast member appears, and that is Rebecca Romaine as Zemiria the Huntress. If you notice, her character has what looks like scales on her armor, and I can't help but think that this is a reference to the actress's most well-known role before number 1, the mutant shapeshifter Mystique from the X-Men franchise, whose body appeared to be covered in chameleon-like scales. Dr. Mbenga is able to deduce that the entity in the nebula created this adventure based on the wishes of his daughter. This is a really interesting way to depict the classic kid makes a wish storyline in which the innocence of a child is able to affect the life of their parent or parents through the actions of a supernatural or otherwise unseen presence. Again, this forces the Doctor into a heart-wrenching decision in which he must give up his relationship with his daughter so that she can live on with this entity. I thought that Dr. Mbenga's choice to let his daughter go was very similar to the one made by Miles O'Brien in the Deep Space Nine episode Time's Orphan, in which his daughter was lost on a planet for 10 years but returned after hardly any time had passed for him. Also, like this episode, O'Brien is able to see what his young daughter looks like as an adult. The speech that his daughter makes to Dr. Mbenga has many similarities with the last speech that Benjamin Sisko made to Cassidy Yates in the series finale of Deep Space Nine, after he left to be with the Prophets. That, along with this episode's mention of Benny Russell, makes me believe that whatever entity the Enterprise came into contact with in this episode may be the same or similar to the ones known as the Prophets that live in the Bajoran wormhole. Just like the Prophets, this entity is able to change the reality around a person, and they also are able to travel outside the normal flow of space and time. The energy form that the entity takes even looks similar to the orbs used by the Prophets. Well, that was everything I saw, but let me know in the comments if I missed anything. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please hit that like button if you have enjoyed it, and I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?